Hello and welcome to the second part of a two-part series I've done on my Inktober drawings. If you haven't seen part one, I'll link it up there, and you might want to check out the drawings and paintings I did in the first half before checking out this video, which will be a continuation of that for the second half of my book. So I filled in one side of this accordion sketchbook with all of the drawings for days 1 to 16. Now I'm going to flip the book over and fill in all of these ones on this side, so I need to get started on these. But before I do, I'll just mention a couple of things that I forgot to talk about in the first video. So in my thumbnail I had this pen in the picture. I have not actually used it properly to draw anything, so my aim is to draw at least one picture with this brush pen. In case you're wondering how it's possible to do 31 drawings in a month, it's pretty darn hard. I am very tired already and I still have half to do, but what I did was actually prepare in advance. So the Inktober prompt list was released at the beginning of September, which gives a whole month to prepare, and I made up a little envelope the same size as my book, cut out a whole bunch of pieces of paper which are the same size, and did all of my drawings on here. So for example, here's the predator. So I drew this out in pencil and then I drew it all over in pen and rubbed out the pencil marks so that I had a basic outline, and I traced everything into the book using my light pad because that's just the easiest thing, and then I don't have a lot of pencil smudges in this one. Now because this is double-sided, I traced everything in, but it's quite difficult to see if you've got the drawings on one side and then you flip it over and you can still see the pencil lines coming through. So I drew all of the drawings on the first side in a blue color race pencil, and then on this side I've drawn them in an orange one so that I can see the difference between the blue and the orange when I was tracing my sketches from here. So that's just a little bit behind that. I had planned all the drawings, I traced them in here well in advance, and so by the time October came around all I had to do was ink them, and that just saves a lot of time and makes it so much easier than trying to come up with the idea and come up with the drawing and then draw it all in one day. Oh, that would be far too much. So let's get into it and I'll see if I can finish this book on time. Day 17, Collide. Now here's a cheerful one. I immediately thought of an asteroid or meteor on a collision course with Earth, and so that's what I drew. I used a combination of Bombay inks and acrylic inks for this. As you know, I only have acrylic inks in black, white and grey, so I'm holding out to get some more colours, and I think by the time this video goes up, the shops will have reopened, so I have to be really careful not to spend all of my money all at once, but I may have to get some of these acrylic inks very soon. I really like the combination of the matte acrylic with the shiny Bombay. It worked pretty well in this painting in particular because the asteroid just looks quite realistic, but the rest of it has got a lot more of a cartoonish kind of vibe, and I've somehow missed recording a bit of that painting there, but you can see the asteroid is going into the Earth's atmosphere and burning up, hopefully just to be a tiny meteorite. So moving on to day 18, Moon. It's another space sky related one, but rather than painting this side black as well, I went for a slightly bluer indigo colour. And this is the Sennelier Indigo, which is one of my favourites. And then I painted a very light layer of it onto the moon to give it a bluish tinge, and went over it with some of that Zig silver ink, which is quite pearlescent and gives it a shiny moon looking glow. So I was trying to think of what to do for this one. I thought about a wolf howling or something like that, but then I remembered E.T. and that very iconic image of the boy flying on his bike across the moon with E.T. in the front basket. And here I am finally using that brush pen to paint in the silhouette, and I also painted in the tree at the bottom. So this was a fairly easy way to start with this pen. I did do a couple more drawings further down the track. I added some washi tape to reinforce that page, but it actually started to come off. But anyway, moving on, because these are going really fast. This one is Loop for day 19. I drew an infinity symbol and then used Dylusions spray inks to go over the background and create a bit of an abstract. It didn't work quite as I wanted it to, so I ended up just painting everything with water to mix it all together. Then I tried adding some shimmery pixie powder. Not the greatest idea in the world, it just kind of sat on there and didn't do what I wanted, but never mind, it's there now. Once that had fully dried, I peeled off the tape because I didn't want that spray getting on my other pages, and I went in with the Zig gold ink to paint over that infinity symbol to make it stand out a lot more. I was originally going to leave this as an empty white mask, but then I decided it would just be easier to paint over the whole thing, and because I had some gaps where the tape was, I just painted over the border with that gold ink, and I like how this one turned out. It was very bright and colourful. On the next page we have day 20, and this is Sprout. I used my platinum fountain pen to draw the outline. It's got a nice fine nib, so I really like using it for drawing, and the ink is platinum carbon ink, so it's fully waterproof and excellent for painting over. Another set of hands. I actually have a few pictures in here with hands, and this picture worked out quite well, which is good. I went in with the Derwent Inktense pan set, mainly because it's easier to make skin tones with the colours provided, and I deliberately left the ink on the hands wet so that the soil colour would run in and make it look a bit more like the soil's spilling over onto the skin. I think that was actually really successful, and I just finished up the painting with a blue background because I felt like I just wanted to fill up this book as much as possible and have a lot of colour on some pages which were a bit duller. And you can see that some of that dilution spray got on the left hand side. Oopsie! Day 21, Fuzzy. I wanted to draw a cute animal, and I went for an Australian quokka. They are a marsupial. I've never actually seen one in the wild, but they are incredibly cute, and they have these adorable smiley faces. Mine's wearing a birthday hat because the 21st is my birthday, and I always like to include some kind of birthday theme in it. I think this is the only drawing where I used this black Fude pen that I had lying around, and I will be colouring in a bit more black. I had some other markers. They did not want to blend out very well in water, even though they say aqua marker on them. I don't know, I can never get them to work properly, especially on cotton hot press paper. It just soaks it in, and then they just don't really want to re-wet properly. I also grabbed a few of my Primrosier pens just to add a few colours and highlights into the fur, and coloured in its little nose. But because the pens weren't blending very well, I just went over everything with the Inktense pan set again, because that seems to be my go-to in this entire month, and it was definitely my most used supply. So magically the hat and background appeared because I completely forgot to record that part. I didn't switch it on, it's so annoying. But anyway, I'll come back to it in a moment. This one is day 22, which is my mum's birthday, and the theme is open. So I was thinking of opening a birthday present, but then I also thought of Pandora's box. So another set of hands here, would you believe? I didn't realise until I was painting this one just how many hands I have in all of my drawings. It's about 3 or 4 pictures with them. I used Bombay India inks for this. I had to water down that purple because it is just so dark when it's at its most concentrated, but it is a really pretty dioxazine purple colour. And then I made a skin tone again and painted in the hands. I didn't go for too much detail. I added in a bit of shadow around the hands just to make them a bit more interesting, but then I decided to add some glue and glitter to my Pandora's box to make it a lot sparklier, and I used a few different types of glitter in differing sizes, and I pulled out some shiny stars. Then I also went over onto the quokka to add some glitter onto its little hat and put some stars in the background to make this more of a cohesive page spread. Plus I knew the glitter was going to transfer anyway, but I did paint everything with Mod Podge, and of course Gandalf stood in it while it was still drying. It was so annoying. The one time I leave my book open and he's straight on it. Anyway, this next one is Leak, and I was thinking of a leaky tap, very original, but of course in this one I had the camera out of focus. I was doing really well with this series of paintings, either not recording or recording out of focus, and of course there's one take, so if I don't get it right, that's it, because I've already drawn it on the paper and I can't redo it. Oh well, here we go, it's in focus again, hooray! And on this page I used my little Japanese shadow set of Boku Undo Isumi colours, so these were pretty good for getting muted tones, and if you water them down enough they're not actually that dark, but they do really build up into a much deeper value. So I thought this would be perfect for kind of a rusty algae covered tap, and I do quite like the simplicity of this picture by comparison to some of the really bright ones that I have in the book. I forgot to say I am going to show all of these pictures again at the end of the video. Day 24 is extinct, and thinking about the meteor hitting the Earth, I was then of course thinking about dinosaurs, and I just had to draw a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I actually drew mine off a toy Tyrannosaurus, so it's probably not super accurate by paleontological standards, but I do quite like how this guy turned out. He's quite cartoonish, and this one was a lot of fun to paint. I used those Boku Undo paints again for him because they're nice and dull, and it's how I would imagine dinosaur skin to be, much like any other reptile. And it is fun using a limited palette, just going in with 2 or 3 colours on the picture and then using values to add in interest, which is the shadows that I'm adding in here. I find cotton hot press paper to be quite absorbent, so you usually have to do multiple layers in order to build up the depth of shadow. And that's what I was just doing here. I wasn't worried too much about scaly details, I was just blobbing on the paint because by now I was getting pretty tired. And then to contrast with my muted dinosaur colour palette, I went in with the brightest colours in the Inktent set and painted in a very bright background and a few highlights on the dinosaur itself. Next page is Splat, and my idea was to drip splatters of ink on the page, but this ended up as a horrendous mess because I of course got the spray bottle out. Big mistake, it just ran everywhere, and so I used some paper to blend it out and make a Rorschach ink blot on there, but I completely lost all detail of the splatters, and I tried to add a few more in, but they just kept blending and the whole thing was a disaster at this point. I was just going, what on earth am I going to do? So in the end, rather than freak out too much, I just decided it was going to be an abstract background, so I left it to dry for ages and then I painted on a big purple splat on the top. So it actually worked out really well, and though it wasn't what I was originally planning, I think this actually turned out a lot better. I dripped on some pure ink onto the dry paper and then I let that dry for about 3 or 4 hours. And then I added some white highlights to make it look a lot juicier. I think it's actually pretty successful and I'm happy with that one. I stuck with the same colour scheme for the next picture, and this is Day 26, Connect. Now I actually read this as correct, so I was thinking of glasses to correct your vision, and I'd drawn my idea out and everything, and then I think it was Miranda's video a few weeks ago that I realised it was actually Connect, and I went, oh. So I was thinking, what am I going to do for that? And then Nick pointed out that he wears glasses and they help him connect with the visual world because he can't really see very much without them, and I was like, okay, so I'm just going to keep it and we'll just make this a slightly more abstract interpretation. So my idea here is that the flower is in focus in the lenses of the glasses, and then the background part is out of focus, and I did that by using wet on wet technique and letting the ink run so it created blurry lines. It actually worked out quite well. I went in with that dark purple for the glasses themselves, and you could see in the top left hand corner something on there was repelling the ink, so I had to go over it multiple times before it would actually stick, but eventually I got there, and I added in a few white highlights to create the illusion of glass. I really like how that whole page spread turned out. But next up we have Day 27. This is Spark, and I was thinking of one of those Tesla balls, you know, that shoot out the different coloured lights, and when you touch it, the sparks of light are kind of drawn to your hands. I didn't draw hands in this one, ironically, but I just drew the globe, and this is probably my worst painting of the entire series of paintings. The globe was fine when I drew it in pencil, but I managed to make it really wobbly once I'd painted it in, as you can see on the left hand side, and yeah, the whole thing is just a bit of a disaster, to be quite honest with you. This is one that I would like to revisit in the future and maybe try again, probably with a different medium, one that blends a bit more and doesn't create stark lines like that black ink does. But watching it now, this one's embarrassingly bad and there was nothing I could do to fix it, so I just kind of left it. And it wouldn't be one of my sketchbooks without at least one dud painting in it. so I can look back on it and laugh. Day 28, crispy, and I immediately thought of a big old bucket of chicken. So that's what I ended up drawing. I used the platinum pen again because it really is the easiest pen I have to draw with, and this is one where it just looks really funny with just the plain outline, but once I started painting it, I think the picture looked a lot better. And here's me trying to draw in the bucket. I really hate drawing curves and circles with ink. I can never get them to look right, but never mind, I'll just paint over everything and that usually hides all the flaws. Here's that Inktense pan set again. This was definitely my most used supply, and I really enjoyed it. I can say after using it as much as I did that it's an excellent set, and I'm much happier with the 24 than I was with the 12. It's just got such a nice range of colours in it, although I do find that they dry quite pale and need to be layered to get a richer depth of colour. Okay, 29 patch is when I actually used that brush pen that I had been putting off using for pretty much this entire Inktober, but I was determined to do at least one drawing with it, and I think I ended up doing two because you'll see another one later. But for this one I was going to do the pumpkin patch, which is the painting I ended up doing last month for the seasonal paintings. But I ended up going with this cute puppy dog because it had an eye patch and it was so adorable. I could not resist adding this into my sketchbook. This actually ended up as one of the more simplistic drawings in this book, and I really like it. I enjoyed using the brush pen in the end, although it's quite hard to control and does take a bit of practice to get good with it. And I still need a lot more practice, but I'm happy with how the puppy turned out, and I could have left it just like this, but I felt like it needed something underneath it because it's just floating in mid-air, so I painted in a bit of Payne's Grey from the Inktense set just to give it a shadow, and then I went in with a little bit of shadow on the dog itself just to make it a bit more interesting, and a bit of red for its collar, but I actually left the background empty on that one. And going into day 30, oh, we're almost there, this one is Slither, and I just thought of a snail immediately, so that's what I went for in this one. I drew it with a black outline, and then I went in with brown Bombay India ink to create glossy lines on its shell. And this worked out pretty well. It looks a bit funny at the moment, but I went over everything with some of the Inktense ochre and the other reddish colour in there, and I think it actually worked out really well. So I used the set for the rest of this painting also. I'd left the puppy without a background, but of course I painted in a background for this one. I felt like the snail needed to be on a nice deep green one, and then I added in lighter green at the top just to give it a gradient. And then I went over everything with a bit of white gel pen just to add in some highlights, and then the black fountain pen to create a bit of shadow underneath it. I also added in a tiny bit of silver ink to make a slimy snail trail. And here we are at day 31. This one is Risk, and it is a 2-page spread because I had that extra side on the inside edge of the book. And I was just going, what on earth do I do for Risk? I really want to draw a haunted house or something, so I was thinking enter at your own risk. That's as good as I could get. But this is basically a haunted house, and I used this brush pen once again for this one, and it worked out okay. But I will confess that I did not spend anywhere near as much time as I could have on this drawing. It was the last one. I did it in advance so that I could have this video finished in time. And I'd had enough of Inktober by now, as you can probably imagine. So the beginning of the house is quite detailed, and then after a while it just kind of morphs into this sketchy mess down the bottom. But I think overall it kind of worked out okay. I would love to redo this one with a lot more time and patience so that I could really do it justice. I think my biggest mistake actually in this one was painting it. As an outline, it worked a lot better than when I put in the shadow colours. I just lost the interest in it, I think. But I do like how the outline came out, and maybe if I'd have just painted the house, it would have been okay, but then I went in with the background and everything, and it's just a bit too much. And that fence and gate is so super dodgy. I should have just left it out, but I was trying to think of enter at own risk, which is why I ended up including it. See, that background is just a bit too dark by comparison to everything else, but I'll just stop bagging on my own work, because I am of course my own biggest critic. I painted the fence in with some of the silver that I had, just to kind of break it up and so everything wasn't grey, and then I went in with a dark blue sky, and I think this actually lifted the drawing quite a bit because it was looking very dreary, and I think just adding in that blue colour does lift it, and so I was a bit happier once I'd added in the background, but it's a bit more cartoonish than I would have liked. I think the best thing I did was adding the blue onto the house and the trees just to give a bit more shadow, and then I have one window lit up while all of the rest are dark, and then I called this done. And here is this side of the accordion book all finished, all of my drawings from day 17 to 31. I think when the book is fully stretched out like this, it measures around 3 meters long. It's ridiculous. So there's no way I could fit this in the studio. But you can see that page spread with the ink blot and the glasses. I really like that one. I think that turned out super colourful. And there's my not so great Tesla globe and the puppy with no actual background painted in, but I think it worked out okay for that one, and the haunted house, which I think could be better, but I actually quite like it just as it is. It's very cartoony. And now I'll just do a quick flip through of each page spread, and here you can see I have tape there. It did not want to stick, so I'm going to have to peel it off. Overall, I'm really happy with all of the drawings that I did in this book, except maybe that Tesla globe. I can't believe I finished the whole thing. I'm so happy. From start to finish, it's all done. The entire book. That's still my favourite spread in the whole thing. And then over we go, and flip the other way. I don't know if I'm going to do Inktober again. It was really consuming, as Miranda from Alkali Creek Art said, all consuming. I totally agree with that, and I will be doing some different mediums in November. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I would love if you subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!